Hello everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Deploying DNSSEC at Scale, sponsored by Cloudflare. My name is Carol Auth of the SANS Institute, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speakers are Dani Grant, Product Manager at Cloudflare, and Matt Bromiley, SANS Digital Forensics and Incident Response Instructor. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Matt.
Good stuff. Thanks, Carol. And good afternoon, morning, evening, and hopefully no one is up too late watching this one, but we are glad you're with us all. Today is probably one of the webcasts I'm most excited about and looking forward to over the past few that I've done. And the primary reason is because we're talking with Dani from Cloudflare, and Cloudflare has a really interesting perspective inside of InfoSec. They have the opportunity to do some amazing things at a scale that very few of us get to do. And while today we're going to be focused on DNSSEC, I want our attendees to definitely watch out for the statistics that Dani throws your way, because you're going to hear them and be like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And then remember that they do it seamlessly and behind the scenes. So it's really exciting. Today we are going to have a little bit of a different format. I'm actually going to let Dani take the reins for most of the presentation, but I'm going to interject and we're going to talk a little bit about what Cloudflare is doing at scale, how we can apply that to some of our smaller InfoSec teams. And actually, I also like the aspect of, I want my InfoSec teams who are watching to also think about how Cloudflare actually makes your life a little bit easier and a little bit more secure by doing these things as well. So with that, Dani, I'm going to hand it over to you, and let's get going. Let's start talking about DNSSEC.
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Dani, and I work on DNS at Cloudflare. We're authoritative for over 6 million domains, and every second we answer 1 million DNS queries across more than 100 locations around the world. And in October 2015, we launched DNSSEC for any domain on Cloudflare for free. So for background on what you need to know about DNSSEC, DNSSEC is a protocol intended to verify the integrity of DNS answers. And what you need to know is that in every DNSSEC answer, there is an extra signature that's returned alongside the answer for resolvers to verify that what's returned is what was added to the domain. So at our scale, this was a challenge. We had to be really creative in our implementation, and I want to share with you some of the steps we took to make DNSSEC work. Specifically how we chose our cipher algorithm and how we save compute cycles on negative answers.
Hey Dani, really quick, before you jump into elliptical curves, you mentioned that it's a response that also includes a verification mechanism. Does that add overload? Does that add overhead to the protocol at all?
Yeah, so this is super interesting and very, very relevant to what we're going to talk about with elliptic curves. Awesome. It's really minor overhead, and we actually reduced it by choosing a cipher algorithm very, very deliberately.
Okay, good stuff. Important note for our teams who are watching there. You may be thinking, oh my gosh, I'm already trying to deal with a network that's already operating at max capacity. Now you want to add something more on. Actually, Dani made a really good point. We're not adding on much data. Number one, we're securing you. So security should come first. But number two, we're going to see how it's actually not that much data being tagged on, so it's not really that much of a concern. And like I said, Cloudflare makes it a lot easier for you. But Dani, go ahead. Let's talk about curves.
Yeah, and it's really important because DNS is supposed to just be fast. So for background, Cloudflare's core competency is in DDoS mitigation. So Cloudflare often mitigates attacks as large as 500 gigabits per second. And one way that attackers DDoS websites is by repeatedly doing DNS lookups that have small queries but really large answers. And the attackers then spoof their IP addresses so that the DNS answers are sent to the server they're attacking. And zones with DNSSEC, because of some of the signature sizes, are usually really ripe for this type of abuse. So like Akamai published a report on attacks using DNS lookups against their DNSSEC-signed .gov domains to DDoS other domains. And so To prevent Cloudflare from being potentially abused for a DNS amplification attack, we took precaution to make sure every DNS answer we send fits into a 512 byte UDP packet, so even when the zone is signed with DNSSEC. And we did this by utilizing the elliptic curve cipher ECDSA, which is DNSSEC algorithm 13, which has smaller key and signature sizes. So there's this Dutch mathematician, Arjen Lenstra, and he famously talks about cryptography in terms of energy. He takes the amount of energy required to break a cryptographic algorithm and compares it with how much water that energy could boil. So like to break a 228-bit RSA key, it requires less energy than it takes to boil a teaspoon of water. But on the other hand, to break a 228-bit elliptic curve key, it requires the amount of energy needed to boil all the water on the Earth.
So Dani, I guess we're at a little bit, we've got a little bit of time before we talk about some collisions here, right?
Yeah, we have a lot of time before we talk about collisions.
Yeah, just a good bit of time. So I think this is an important thing to focus on, especially in a state where SHA-1 has now been broken. And I know, I mean, I can remember personally when that happened. I had a lot of folks calling me who were like, "Oh my gosh, what do I do now? Now I need to upgrade all of my cryptographic hashes. Now I need to change all my infrastructure." And then everyone started worrying that Git was going to be broken. And I'm sure those of you watching know that once you hear about a key being broken, you all of a sudden start to think about where the places those keys are used. I think it's a super important note here. Yeah, boiling all the water on Earth is an awesome way to quantify this and say, yeah, this is not being broken anytime soon. This is not happening because it's a ridiculous amount of energy. The other side of it too is that this is the default that Cloudflare went with. There's always an option inside of security to take an easier method, and I'm not saying this is necessarily a hard method, but there's always an option to take an easier way with less data, with less options, but instead they went the route of extreme security, and I hope, Dani, you don't mind me calling it that, because I like it. I think it's a good place to be in, where it's kind of like, hey, you know what? Not only did we secure it for free, but we also secured it with a pretty darn hard to crack key as well.
Yeah, and actually for us, this was the easier and actually only option, because at this scale, we really care about compute cost, and ECDSA, because of the smaller keys, is faster for us to sign. So I'll show you a little bit of that. And so check this out. This is great, Google Slides to PowerPoint formatting. With elliptic curve cryptography in the ECDSA cipher, we can use these smaller keys, right, with the same level of security as a larger RSA key, and then we are able to keep packet size under 512 bytes. But like I said, there's another benefit, which is ECDSA is really fast, and actually we made it even faster, which is really important when we are trying to reduce the amount of CPU consumption required to sign so many DNS records. Yeah.
I was going to say, I think one of the important takeaways here is, at least the way I see it, is I want those folks who are watching, especially those folks who are monitoring cloud environments. I know it's very useful. We're talking to Cloudflare, but I want you to think about in your cloud environments, one of the reason why Cloudflare had to optimize this was the same reason you have to optimize your operations as well. You know, you're charged by the bit. You're charged by for both data going in and out, as well as data that you're storing as well. So it's actually very similar to a lot of the ways a lot of data centers optimize, is depending on the protocols that they choose, depending on the types of file transfers that they use, or what they store in the cloud or what they don't store in the cloud. Dani, I think you're telling us Cloudflare made the same type of decision and said, you know what, we want to be fast, but also we really kind of care about processor cycles. We'd like to have those free if possible. And this is how you got there.
100%. So we originally chose ECDSA because we thought it was fast, and then an engineer on our team, Vlad Krasnov, made it even faster. So he implemented ECDSA natively in Go, and then he was able to speed up signing by 21 times. And his optimizations are now part of the standard Go crypto library as of Go version 1.6. And it now only takes us like a split of a second, 0.0001 of a second, to sign records for a DNS answer. So that's one of the optimizations that we do to lower our CPU costs with DNSSEC. The second is really interesting and has to do with how for negative answers for NX domain. So for background, here are all the things that go into a negative answer by default when the answer is signed with DNSSEC. So let's say we were doing a DNS query for a domain that was signed but the name didn't exist for no types. So the first thing that would be returned is an SOA, just like with any negative answer, signed or unsigned. But of course, because it's DNSSEC, there's a signature. And then the next thing that's returned is this special record type that's unique to DNSSEC called NSEC. And what it serves to do is prove to you that this host name that you were looking for cannot exist because nothing exists between those two names that are returned here. So in this case, bogus cannot exist because nothing exists between www.apps and Cloudflare verify. And of course, because it's DNSSEC, this is also signed. So remember, we had already these 4 records. Now there's a second NSEC, and this one is returned for the wildcard. This one says bogus does not exist, and there's no wildcard that would have covered for it on the domain, and this one is separately signed. And so all in all, it's 6 DNS records just to tell you that the domain doesn't exist, and so it yields really large answer sizes. So the problems for us with negative answers in DNSSEC is, first, it takes a database lookup to look up what are the previous and next answers just to return the NSEC records. So it's really expensive to compute. And the second, these large answers are bait for reflection attacks, and we don't want to encourage DDoS on the internet. And they're just slow for the internet, and DNS is supposed to be fast. So we do something a little bit different. What we do is we return just one NSEC per answer, and we return it on the name itself. So we don't have to look up the previous name. And then the next name, we lie. We totally lie, and we say the next name is always /000 / whatever the missing name was. And that way we keep answer sizes really small, and we don't need to return 6 records to say one thing. You can see a comparison of the answer sizes. Cool, and just to review, Cloudflare does 2 things to save compute on DNSSEC. The first thing we do is use ECDSA and elliptic curves to generate small answer sizes that are faster for us to sign and verify. And the second thing we do is we auto-generate and lie in our negative answers.
Dani, so a quick question. I'm actually going to take us back a slide here real quick. And sure. With regards to the black lies, so you said we're doing this, and I just want to help make sure our viewers are getting this. So instead of returning 6, you return just 1, correct? Only 1 NSEC per answer.
Yeah, so usually you return 2 NSEC records. One tells you what's the previous and next name, so it proves the name couldn't have existed between those. And the second is returned to prove that there was no wildcard. And what we do is return an NSEC on the name itself. So resolvers get the idea, but we don't have to do database lookups to figure out what is the previous and next name in the zone, do a sorted search.
Gotcha. Okay. Is this causing any more work for my DNS servers?
Nope, they still, the resolvers still do the same validation. They just look for the NSEC. But on the authoritative side, on Cloudflare side, we're no longer having to compute or search.
Awesome. Okay, so I actually get answers faster, and you guys get to process them faster.
Exactly that.
Even better. Okay.
We actually think that this is kind of better overall. And so we wrote an internet draft. It's going through the IETF process.
Nice. I can't agree more. It's such a novel concept. I love the black lies response because it helps save you guys processing, but also it makes sure that the protocol works and does what it's supposed to do and in an efficient manner. So this I love the way Cloudflare approaches this at scale, and you guys have certainly worked on the computational aspects and what it takes to implement this and make it fast and effective. If I'm, let's step back just a moment. If I'm a small business, or I'm someone who's maybe got a smaller kind of IT shop, you know, maybe I'm outsourcing my DNS, or I'm pointing to you guys. How does this affect me in my different in my different operations? Does it mean it's harder to attack me, or does it make it easier to attack me?
Yeah, this is awesome. So it used to be that if you wanted to like run a website, you had to like run your own server, like, you know, sat under your desk or something. And so DNS is changing in the same way, where you no longer have to run your own DNS. You can totally outsource it, and you no longer have to run your own DNSSEC. Someone can do it for you. And so what this means is someone with click of a button can get secure DNS that protects them against phishing and cache poisoning attacks. That's really fast. They don't get compromised speed for DNSSEC. That's safeguarding actually not just themselves, but the whole internet against these giant DNS reflection attacks.
Yeah, no, for sure. I can't agree with you more. And that's kind of the point I want to make sure we drive home as well is, you know, I mean, so I have to ask, only because you brought it up, what's the largest DNS DDoS you guys have seen? Can you share with us?
I don't know what it is. I
mean, 500 megabits a second is that's kind of a big deal anyways, right off the bat there. But yeah, I think that's the other takeaway I want to make sure our viewers get as well is, number one, everything Danny's talked about, it's seamless. Your data does not get impacted by it. It's not one of those things where you all of a sudden need to change your entire infrastructure in order to get the benefits of this. But number two, I view it, and Danny, correct me if I'm wrong here, I view it kind of like the Let's Encrypt initiative, where let's all move to encrypted traffic. Let's move to secure DNS, because it helps protect everyone on the whole. Would you agree with that?
I really do. One of the challenges in moving 100% of domains to DNSSEC is that in order for you on your domain to start signing the domain, not only does your DNS provider have to support DNSSEC, but your registrar and your registry have to support it, and they all have to support the same DNSSEC algorithms. And so there's just so many hops. And so something that we've started to do is work with registrars and registries to automate the whole process so that it's more seamless. The user doesn't even have to think about it, and maybe one day they don't even have to click a button.
Oh, nice. So if I'm going to register a domain and I need to find DNS servers, do I need to specify a DNSSEC, or is it, if I choose like Cloudflare, for example, it's automatic?
So today it can't be automatic, and the reason is because Cloudflare will start signing your domain, but in order for resolvers to know that they should expect a signed answer, one level up in the parent zone, there needs to be an indicator of that. So you would go to your registrar and add some key material, and so there's still kind of human intervention, but Cloudflare is working on automating that.
Nice.
We just did an automation with .dk, so all of the .dk zones on Cloudflare that wanted DNSSEC had it without a click of a button, which is, I think, a big step.
Yeah, that's huge. That's awesome, because I'm sure, as you know, I think it's literally, you can count in seconds the amount of time it takes to register a domain these days, and it takes half that time to register an insecure domain these days. And if we can get to a stage where they are one and the same, where registering a secure domain takes the same amount of time as registering a secure one, that just makes everyone safer, and it makes the internet a much safer place for all of us, which is exactly where we all want to be. I hope no one's watching and they want the opposite. So, and then just to offer our viewers, in case anyone is kind of experiencing some of these DNS issues for the first time, when Danny earlier was alluding to the parent needing to have an indicator about it, DNS is kind of like, it's a very complex but obvious, weirdly fast and seamless lookup process. And as you go through that process, we basically need security at every step of the way, right, Danny?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So that makes sense. So for those of you who are kind of in that DNS implementation phase, or you may be looking at kind of an overhaul or a revamp, something coming up soon, It's very similar to kind of having an SSL cert on your intranet and saying that you're secure because you've got that. There's obviously multiple layers of where things have to be applied. So I'd say at a minimum, and obviously we're aware of what Cloudflare can bring to the table, but I'd say at a minimum, if you know, you are interested in looking at making sure that you're secure and making sure that your traffic is being handled securely as well, make sure you understand that it's got to be done at all levels of the lookup process, not just you know, in your terms of agreement or anything of that nature. So I think it's really also helpful to make sure that, and this is what we're doing right now, is educating folks onto these next level protocols, these next steps, and how they're more secure and how they help protect us all. And I think it's a very important step for everyone to be considerate of, especially those folks who are walking into their own implementations or maybe moving to looking to outsource theirs. You know what to look for now. We've got a wrap-up slide here before we start talking about some Q&A, but I just wanted to kind of outline one particular point. And Dani brought this up multiple times throughout her presentation, and I think this is one of the things I want to hone the most, is that DNS itself is a protocol that honestly, and Dani, tell me if I'm wrong, no one thinks about.
That sounds right.
Yeah, sorry, except for Cloudflare. It's assumed, you know, and if anyone's watching and you're just getting a start in InfoSec, just getting a start in IT even, or, you know, you're watching this for, you know, for some education on DNS, you know, it's the phone book of the, internet. It helps us look things up. What happens if I drop a malicious phone book at your front door? That's, you know, it really is that simple of an example, but the important takeaway here is there's something that everyone uses on a daily basis, and it's inherently very, very fast because it has to be fast. You know, I'm sure a lot of folks remember what dial-up days were. Dial-up days were because of modem speeds. They can't be because of DNS lookups. We don't want to be at that stage whatsoever. And I think, you know, that was one of the biggest questions that came about when DNSSEC started to come up was, okay, hey, we need to secure this protocol because there's some attackers out there who are really abusing it. And I mean, to Dani's slide earlier, I mean, 500 gigabits a second. I mean, that's unheard of traffic in a lot of places. There's very few folks operating at that level. Although I think it's funny, I keep seeing reports come out where folks are moving data at a terabit a second. And I wish I could have my hands on that speed for just a moment, but I'd be like a dog chasing a car. I don't know what I'd do if I actually had it. I don't know what I'd do with a terabit a second. Transfer a lot of data and be happy, I suppose. But back to our point about DNS, I think what I want everyone to make sure they get from this is DNS is a protocol that everyone relies on. It is extremely important to the operation of the internet. Therefore, we can easily say securing it is also, to quote Dani, important to securing the internet itself. And that's what I want our folks to understand, especially as we go forward and as you register new domains, as you outsource your DNS, as you prop up your sites, as you secure your infrastructures, as you secure your businesses, make sure you're taking things like this into consideration. Dani did a great job and showed us that there's no data loss. So I've sat in several meetings where folks say, well, if we do this, it's going to impact our data, you know, X percentage, whatever it may be. Guess what? Folks at Cloudflare went back and they can now do a signature in, what was it, Dani? 0.0001 seconds, I think? Yeah. Let me tell you what, if there's a data center concerned with saving that much time, I would recommend putting your sysadmins on rollerblades so that they can skate around the campus and skate around the data center and stuff. We're talking about saving a lot of time and implementing a lot of security. So huge implications for the internet and the place of where we need to be. Dan, I don't know, I almost feel like this is probably what it was like to talk about HTTPS when it first came out.
Yeah, I think so, but I would relate it more to like IPv6 because
yeah, there we go.
We've been talking about DNSSEC since like 2001, and so that it feels like that sort of rollout.
There we go. Let's just hope it. Let's hope the adoption rate is a little faster by the larger majority for sure. But no, you're right. That's an excellent way of putting it. It's this thing. Hey, we need to do this. Hey, we need to do this, and then we do it. Hey, let's adopt this. Let's go. Let's move. And finally, we're at a point now where you know, we're seeing a lot more use of it. So I'm hopeful that we'll get DNSSEC to that point as well. With that. That's going to bring us to the Q&A part. Carol, I'm going to hand it back to you to see if we've got any questions, but I know Dan and I could continue to go back and forth about some of the great aspects of DNSSEC here, but I want to give our audience a chance to put forward some questions.
All right, well, thanks for that great presentation. And you're correct, we do have some questions ready for the Q&A. However, if anyone has a question for our presenters, please enter it into the questions window now. Our first question is, Dani mentioned cache poisoning. What are exactly all the dangers for domains that don't use DNSSEC?
Yeah, so this is super interesting. So when DNS was invented back in the 80s, it was just really like, professors and like academics and researchers online. They all knew each other and they really trusted each other. And so no one could have fathomed that someone malicious would ever be on the internet. And so DNS relies totally on trust to operate. And so a DNS server will ask a question, and then kind of any server that answers, even a different server than the one they ask, so long as it can guess a few correct IDs, it will trust its answer. And so without DNSSEC signatures to verify the answer, a rogue DNS server on the internet can point traffic to their server, to a phishing site, all sorts of places.
Okay, thanks.
Carol, sorry, I'll add to that one as well.
Sure.
We actually, working in incident response, we actually see this happen, honestly, more frequently than I'd like to see it happen. But for some folks, it feels and sounds like a little bit of an older attack. Spoofing and poisoning the DNS cache, but actually we still see attackers do this. Dani brought up a really good point. It's kind of like you walk into a room and you just yell out, how far away is the sun? And the first person who responds with what seems like a logical answer, you'll take it. And then you go back and that's what you report on. And the problem is that answer is directing our users to the sites that they're going to the sites that they're visiting. And we do see some attackers set up these mechanisms to poison the DNS and, refer all the traffic that they can within the environment to their specific site. And there's actually an issue that we see with intranet abuse as well. A lot of folks, I'm sure, almost everyone who's watching right now probably has a company that runs some sort of intranet where you've got a range of internal IPs that are unique to you and obviously not accessible from anywhere else. Attackers love finding these infrastructures because they can find the things like your SharePoints or your hubs or your common internal web pages, and they love to kind of redirect where those go. And they know because DNS will look at it and say, hey, go to where I tell you to go. Here's the answer that you're looking for. They'll redirect it. Now, intranet, Dani, I don't know, how does DNSSEC play with inside of an environment? Do the dynamics change? Are we there yet?
I've never seen someone use it inside of someone's intranet.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat too. It's an interesting example, but from the external point of view, where we obviously do see DNSSEC in process and see it be capable, that's where our attackers are really, really causing a lot of harm and damage because they're able to take, intranet site is one thing. That's traffic that you can validate, traffic you can control. It's within inside a firewall. External traffic, though, imagine if you could redirect all the folks in your organization who are going to Google right now. Run a report and see how many folks have gone to Google in the past hour, and imagine if you could just simply redirect that to somewhere else. It's a pretty dangerous type of attack, and we see a lot of attackers do it. And again, if we can wrap a security mechanism around it, it makes us all safer.
All right, thanks. Would DNSSEC replace PKI completely someday?
So this is a great question. DNSSEC and PKI are separate and they actually rely on one another. So PKI is your infrastructure for setting up keys and signing and maybe issuing certificates. It's all of that type of infrastructure, which is necessary for DNSSEC if you're going to be issuing keys, rolling them, and signing DNS material. So they rely on one another. They won't replace each other.
Okay, thanks. You touched on this, but so many registrars only support certain TLDs for DNSSEC. If you're a .org, for example, your choices are limited. Is Cloudflare pushing registrars to expand this, and realistically, how soon can we expect things to be close to universally available?
Yeah, this is something we're really passionate about and seeing a lot of like very positive changes in the ecosystem. So like we said, in order for a domain to use DNSSEC, its DNS provider, its registrar, and its registry all have to support the protocol and with the same algorithms. And Cloudflare is using a very new algorithm. We're using ECDSA, or Algorithm 13, which a lot of TLDs and a lot of registrars haven't updated yet. But as they're seeing demand, as their like domain owners are coming to them, they're adding support, which is amazing. So since we launched DNSSEC, .nl, .eu, .no, and then most recently .gov added support for Algorithm 13. So it's the world is changing very quickly, and I think very positively.
So Dani, folks who want DNSSEC should cast their vote, right?
Yeah, and what's so funny is for the registrar and registry, all they need to do is just support, it's like a database change for them. They just need to support 13 as a valid integer in their database. They don't actually have to make any real code changes, so it's very easy for them to do.
Oh, perfect. I was actually going to ask what, from Cloudflare's perspective, what was it like getting those top levels to actually get the algorithm in place? But it really is just a database change, huh?
Yep, they just need to accept 13 as a valid field input.
All right. So for those TLD admins who are watching this talk, we're reaching out. Come on, it's just a database change now.
All right, thanks. I know how DNS is supposed to work and what false answers can do. I did not get the part about abusing it to create denial of service problems via making long negative responses. Or maybe I misheard things?
Yeah, DNS is really special in that a very small DNS query can yield a very large DNS answer. And the other thing that's very special about DNS is that the protocol it transports over, UDP, doesn't establish a complete connection. So you can spoof the IP address that you're making queries from. And so what that means is that you can spoof an IP address, ask a very small query that yields a very large answer, and then that very large answer goes to the spoofed IP address that you want to attack. And so with a very small amount of queries, you can send a ton of traffic to a different server. And DNS is unfortunately a great attack vector for that. And DNSSEC, because it adds so many signatures on top of that, is often the attack vector used.
Yeah, I think Dani brings up a good point to that question, Carol, which is the understanding of UDP. And unfortunately, UDP was made. It's for anyone who's just getting introduced to these protocols or just getting familiar with this network, this type of network traffic. Long story short, UDP is a very basic packet. A packet gets sent. That's it. It's not responsive, and it's not doesn't confirm like TCP does. And I'm going really high level here. And unfortunately, attackers have found a way to abuse kind of the inherent capabilities of UDP, and that is actually where the power of that attack lies. Is you can crack that packet to basically be abusive and do do what it's not supposed to be doing. And I guess to further elaborate on Dani's point as well is I kind of, whenever I describe this, I kind of compare it as when you drop a letter in the mailbox. You obviously have your from in the top corner, and you've got the to in the middle. Reverse those. And what you're doing now is instead you're saying, I'm going to drop a mail. I'm going to drop a letter and make it look like it's coming from someone and going to someone. It's actually the opposite. So what you're doing instead is you're kind of abusing the system and saying, I want this to go somewhere where it's not supposed to do via a mechanism that I'm not supposed to be using this for.
Yeah, so there's one other besides DNSSEC, there's one other query in DNS that yields these very large answers, which is called an any query, which asks resolvers, please send me all the records that you have for this zone, no matter what the record is. And so Cloudflare was looking at our logs, and we saw very few valid uses for this and very many uses for this during DDoS attacks. And so one of the other things that we've done, just kind of as a way to keep all of our DNS answers small and keep the internet kind of free from DDoS, is stop answering any queries. If you try to query a domain on Cloudflare with query type any, we'll respond with a pretty much deprecated record type called HInfo with a text saying we don't respond to any.
I think Dan, that's awesome. I think that's a big takeaway for our attendees who are watching as well. Is so correct me if I'm wrong. You guys baselined what looks like DNS requests and found the anomalies, right?
Yeah, exactly that. And because you need to assemble all of the records that you have for the zone, they're really CPU intensive to respond to. So if you're getting a ton of any queries, it can really exhaust a server. And so there are a lot of full DNS providers that sit behind Cloudflare. And so something that we've done for many of them is actually answer any with HInfo at the edge. So turn off any for them without any queries getting to their servers ever.
Oh, that is awesome. Yeah, I think that's, for those folks who are watching, for our attendees who are monitoring networks and that kind of stuff, this is an important, I think Cloudflare set an awesome example here, an important one, which is they took a look at how the traffic that was coming in was being used maliciously, and then they blocked what for the most part, if not all, was malicious. And this further alludes to more reasons as to why we need to secure our protocols and why DNSSEC is so important, is it helps us, once again, define what's normal and what's abnormal in our environments and help protect those during normal business operations.
All right, thank you. So an example in which DNSSEC is useful would be an attacker rerouting all DNS responses in a coffee shop Wi-Fi, correct?
Yeah, 100%. We also see cache poisoning attacks used often for government surveillance. So a government actor will route traffic through their servers first and then take visitors to wherever they wanted to go originally.
All right, thank you. You talked about what Cloudflare does for NX domain negative answers. What do you do for no data?
Oh, so this is funny. You'll like this. NX domain is the domain doesn't exist and there's no record types on the domain. No data is the name exists, but just not that record type. So it's like looking for an MX domain on blog.cloudflare.com. Like that doesn't exist, but there's an A record there. So in a no data negative answer response, you would respond, that type doesn't exist, but here are all the types that do exist. And so you still have to go back, do a database lookup for all the record types that exist on that name and then return them. And so Cloudflare lies, and we return all the types no matter what, excluding the one that you asked for. So if you ask for MX, then we return all the types excluding MX. The next second, if you ask for TXT, we return all the types excluding TXT.
So Dani, if I request MX and then TXT, they're actually, it's not cumulative. I could keep getting back the false answers in a no data response.
Yep, they're all lies. We generate them all at the edge, and so two people at the same time could ask one for does MX exist, and we would send back MX doesn't, but TXT does, and all of the other types do. And the other person would ask, does TXT exist? We'd say TXT doesn't, but MX does, and all the other types. They're all generated.
That's awesome. So this is another important security takeaway for our attendees as well. And Daniel, let me know if I'm wrong here, but I've worked with or I've investigated, let's put it that way, several attack groups who actually use DNS to profile an environment. And they do it by kind of issuing these calls that they know are going to give them back every record in existence. I mean, they're not concerned about CPU cycles on their end. And they're looking at it and saying, okay, I know I want to attack domain.com. Let me see what domain.com is running, because then it's going to tell me if they're running a mail server or if there's some subdomains I should go after or any potential targets, right?
Yeah, this is 100% the case.
Yeah, and then instead, and this is, I love this too, now granted, we're getting a little bit away from DNSSEC, but as another security measure, you guys put in place and said, you know what, we're not going to help you profile someone's network. Instead, we're just going to make your life a little more complicated by continuously giving you every type of record except the one you asked for. I love it. It's cheeky and it's awesome for security.
Yeah, one of the, I think, biggest holes in the original DNSSEC protocol is that by default, in negative answers, the authoritative server returns the previous and next name. And so what that means is that someone can literally walk the zone. They can keep asking for the next name and learn every single name in the zone. So like if they're walking the .gov zone, they learn every single US government agency. And so DNS isn't a secret, but should it be that public? We don't know. And so there was like a way to prevent that, which was, okay, let's hash all the values, all the previous and next names, but it's still susceptible to a dictionary attack. And so I think lying in the answers is actually the way to circumvent any ability to find out zone data.
Definitely, I'm right there in agreement with you. I think this makes life very difficult for a lot of attackers. So thank you for putting this one in place. I like this one.
All right, thank you. Do you pre-compute your DNSSEC answers?
Oh, so this is interesting. So the standard way to implement DNSSEC is to pre-compute every single DNSSEC answer. So all the so every answer plus its signature, and also all of the negative answers. But for Cloudflare's traffic, there are a few zones that are queried for a lot, and then there's a long tail of millions of zones that don't get queries that often. And so for us to continuously generate new answers for all of these would be really expensive for us. And so in order to ship DNSSEC to anyone that needed it for free, what we decided to do is actually compute the answer on the fly, so only when it's queried for.
All right, for this next one, I'm not sure I'm phrasing it correctly, so feel free to rephrase it for the audience. Why is the negative answers lying DNS standards compliant?
Yes. This is interesting. So, there's DNS is really reliant on all of the players in DNS following very specific protocols. So that way, the authoritative servers can talk to the resolvers, that can talk to the clients, and everyone can communicate really smoothly. And so Cloudflare is doing something that doesn't really fit into the current specs. And so the question is, why does it still work? And so there are a few reasons. So the first one is that there's already an RFC that stands before us. It's RFC 4470. It's called White Lies, which is why we called ours Black Lies. And White Lies says you are allowed to randomly generate the next names in NSEC. And it says you're allowed to not set the second NSEC for the wildcard subdomain. So what that allows us to do is set just one NSEC and randomly generate a value. And so that kind of set the standard for us to return something that's a little bit different in NSEC.
Okay, thank you. What is the support like for ECDSA algorithm 13?
Oh, so we talked about it a little bit. Where a domain for it to use DNSSEC needs to have their DNS provider, the registrar, and the registry support the same DNSSEC algorithms. And so, like I said, the support when we started was quite limited, but over time, a lot of different registries and registrars are adding support, with the most recent one being .gov. It's changing and very rapidly, very positively.
All right, well, we just had oh no, that was the same question I just asked. Sorry, I thought we had a new one. That's all we have so far. Dani, do you have any closing thoughts?
It was great being here today. Let me know if you have any questions.
All right, well, thank you so much, Dani and Matt, for your great presentation, and to Cloudflare for sponsoring this webcast, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, you can visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.